Tonight on Primetime, 1 year after the Washington summit, the South Caucasus is moving from political commitments towards practical connectivity. Trade routes are reopening, energy links are emerging, and the TRIP project is taking shape. Can economic integration turn the momentum of the past year into lasting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia? Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Katie Wilson. First this evening, a year after the Washington meeting, the South Caucasus is entering a new phase, with once divided routes reopening, trade links expanding, and connectivity emerging as a key driver of regional change. The developments mark a shift from years of confrontation towards a new focus on cooperation and economic integration.
The August 8th Washington summit marked a turning point in Azerbaijan-Armenia relations, bringing together Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, with US President Donald Trump, to establish a framework for peace and connectivity. The agreements went beyond bilateral ties, opening a new vision for the South Caucasus, a region at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, where greater connectivity could reshape economic and strategic relations. A key element was the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or TRIP, a connectivity project aimed at linking mainland Azerbaijan to its Nakhchivan exclave through Armenia and integrating the region into wider east-west trade routes. Over the past year, focus has shifted from political commitments to practical steps. Azerbaijan and Armenia continued peace discussions while border delimitation efforts moved forward. One of the most visible developments has been the return of commercial transit. Railways that were closed for decades have resumed carrying goods to Armenia through Azerbaijan, including grain, fertilizer, and other commodities from Azerbaijan and Russia. Energy cooperation has also emerged as a sign of changing relations, with Azerbaijan supplying Armenia with fuel, including diesel and gasoline. People-to-people contacts have expanded as well, with Armenian and Azerbaijani civil society delegations visiting each other's countries under the Bridge for Peace initiative and crossing through officially delimited border sections. The process has also attracted international interest, with US officials and companies engaging with both countries on TRIP, infrastructure, energy, and investment opportunities. 1 year on, the South Caucasus is entering a new phase, with progress increasingly reflected not only in diplomatic engagement, but also in the movement of goods, infrastructure projects, and growing economic cooperation.
Joining us now to discuss this more is Deputy Editor-in-Chief Orkan Amashov. So thank you for being with us firstly. So 1 year on from the Washington summit, how has the relationship between these two countries changed?
First of all, we need to understand what happened on the 8th of August a year ago. That was a critical moment. Before that point, Azerbaijan and Armenia had agreed on a number of things. So the text of the peace agreement was agreed upon, basically, on the 13th of March 2025. There were two major obstacles. So the obstacles outside the peace agreement, OSCE Minsk Group disbandment, and also, of course, naturally, the Armenian constitution, the preamble, which in Azerbaijan's view constitutes territorial claim. And of course, the third issue, connectivity, because as you know, there was an agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia back in 2020 about unhindered passage between two parts of Azerbaijan. There was supposed to be a Russian control. Armenia was not happy with that, and there was a question of sovereignty. Basically, 8th of August sorted out a number of things, really. First of all, parties agreed on Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. That was a compromise between Azerbaijan's unimpeded passage requirement and Armenia's sovereignty concern. Plus, on that very date, foreign ministers of these two countries appealed, they co-signed and jointly appealed to OSCE Secretariat to effect the disbandment of the OSCE Minsk Group, which happened actually on the 1st of September 2025. And of course, they signed a joint declaration, and the Washington process started. And what is very important about this process, although peace treaty was initialed on that date, which means a legal certainty, it is yet to be signed. It is to be signed subject to one particular Azerbaijani requirement, of which we talked about extensively. but there was a limited economic interaction between the countries. For the first time, after President Aliyev of Azerbaijan in October 2025 said that Azerbaijan does lift all the restrictions of transit of cargo from via Azerbaijan to Armenia, limited economic interaction start, and that has been incredibly beneficial. And of course, there was many other confidence-building measures, including Peace Bridge Initiative, of which we are all well aware.
So you've touched on TRIP, which was one of the central outcomes of that process. How transformative could that be for the South Caucasus if it manages to become fully operational?
It is going to be, if sides are very successful, it's going to be a massive game changer for the region. It's not just about Azerbaijan's two separate parts being connected via Armenia, but also this particular connectivity element is a vital ingredient of the wider puzzle of the middle corridor. So you need to get access to Central Asia. You can't get access to Central Asia via Georgia only because you need to go through Azerbaijan. So Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity does not just connect two parts of Azerbaijan, also connects Armenia's infrastructure to the entire South Caucasus. So it's going to be absolutely transformative. Also, naturally, connectivity means prosperity. That particular entity called TRIP is owned 74% by United States and 26% by Armenian state. Armenian sovereignty and ownership is intact, but the management is going to rest largely with that entity. It will connect Armenia's southern territory, which is sort of isolated from the rest of the country. If you want to travel from Yerevan to Mehri, you're going to face massive challenge. Therefore, going through Nakhchivan to Mehri will be much easier. The region will be more interconnected. House of Caucasus will be established. Armenia will reduce its dependency on Russia. Turkish-Armenian normalization will happen. Entire region will change. So back to your question, it's going to be massively transformative.
So this all sounds great. If it is to happen, to get underway, what are the biggest unresolved issues that could still slow or derail that normalization process that you were just touching upon there?
One of the possibilities would be flare-ups along the conditional border, which hasn't happened this year. In fact, if memory serves me correctly, since March or February 2024, there's been absolutely no clash along the border. So we need to maintain de facto peace. That's number one thing. Number two thing, which could potentially slacken the process, is delay regarding Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, because Azerbaijan effectively built its own connectivity elements, both in the mainland part and also Nakhchivan, but Armenia has not yet started. So any delay there could undermine the confidence in the peace process. That's very important. And we haven't seen anything there. Iran, of course, naturally is against it because Iran believes that that connectivity piece would actually obstruct its connection to Armenia. So that's a fundamental problem. If Russia manages to influence the Armenian political process, that could be problematic because the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process and Turkish-Armenian normalization is creating a new reality for Armenia. And naturally, Russia is not expected to be happy with this new reality. They are going to increase gas prices. They are putting massive pressure on Armenia to choose between European Union and Eurasian Economic Union. These things could undermine the peace process here. But I think, ultimately, the major issue that we need to focus on is, of course, referendum. If there is a referendum, and that referendum does not result in Armenia adopting a new constitution, the peace process could potentially be slackened.
And we've had the Armenian election within this year as well. What has a win for Pashinyan done for this process?
That was a massive test for Pashinyan's resolve and his political capabilities and credentials. I think he managed to achieve a resounding success. Although, if you look at the composition of the parliament, you would see that in the previous version of the parliament, there were only 71 seats actually commanded and controlled by Civil Contract Party, which meant absolute super majority. Now they have only 64 seats, which is a constitutional majority allowing you to do whatever you want, but not to do those massive things involving constitution, referendum, and so forth. He's very confident. But let's see what happens. He is slowly increasing his political influence within the country. He gets massive support from European Union. Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity and wider Azerbaijan-Armenian peace, Turkish-Armenian normalization helping massively. And he looks very secure. But what he will do with this reality is another question. I think, I expect, if things go as they expected to go, peace treaty could be actually signed in mid-2027. And that would be massively important. And also, for Armenia, the peace treaty is not just important for the sake of peace treaty. They need Turkish-Armenian normalization. Turkish-Armenian normalization is incredibly important for them. That will open the Armenian market to Turkish business and vice versa. It will really create for them opportunities to integrate themselves to European Union because Armenia is very isolated. They are bordering with, naturally, Türkiye, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Iran. They don't have access to European Union country. Türkiye would be absolutely vital ingredient. So therefore, this referendum thing is incredibly important. There's a second scenario. If peace treaty is not signed, it will remain there, and there will be limited economic interaction. But that limited economic interaction will not replace real benefits of the peace. And that's something, I suppose, is preying heavily upon Prime Minister Pashinyan's mind at this precise moment in time.
In talking about that opportunity for economic interaction, is that somewhat of a safeguard for renewed confrontation, given that there is this opportunity here?
Well, basically, economic independence will create massive opportunities for these two countries. There's no incentive, either on the part of Azerbaijan or on the part of Armenia, to restart this conflict. Azerbaijan has achieved everything that it wanted to achieve. Territorial integrity fully recovered, but as of September 2023. Border delimitation and demarcation is underway. There's a bilateral commission, and they will go through all of the details. And to have a proper peace, you're not supposed to delimit and demarcate the entire section of your border. I mean, Russia and Kazakhstan's border has not been delimited as yet. I mean, there are many issues there. So basically, this process should be continued, and economic interdependency would create favorable conditions, and will also send a very clear message to the Armenian public that peace is a good thing. And I think Pashinyan's victory was a very clear indication that public is fully in favor of peace. And those elements within the public which are not in favor of peace, they still believe that they are not in a position to change the status quo. Yep, so you want to ask a question?
Yeah, you touched upon Iran, the country that borders both Azerbaijan and Armenia. Yep. Talk me through why they're against the TRIP project.
The answer is very clear. It's no-brainer. They have been consistently against what was originally conceived as Zengezur Corridor and later renamed as Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity for a number of reasons. Armenia is heavily dependent on Iran. Basically, Armenia is bordering with Azerbaijan. There's no proper economic interaction. Bordering with Georgia, which is another country. Bordering with Türkiye, border is not open. Iran is sort of a safety net for them. It's naturally, Iran knows to what extent Armenia is dependent on Iran. And this Trump Route for International Prosperity as an infrastructure in Iranian mindset could actually limit their access to Armenia. They treat this connectivity piece as a blockage of some sort. But of course, naturally, you can have access between Armenia and Iran, and you can have access between two parts of Azerbaijan, via Zengezur Corridor or TRIP. Their concern is losing leverage. They do not want, for very understandable and very strong geopolitical reasons, Azerbaijan to lose Azerbaijan's necessity of being reliant on Iran. Because if you want to go from Azerbaijan's main part to Nakhchivan, if you go through Armenia, you do no longer need Iran. Iran wants Azerbaijan to be always reliant exclusively on Iran to be able to get from main part to Nakhchivan. And secondly, they lose the leverage on Armenia, of course. Armenia, which is integrated with Azerbaijan, Armenia, which is having absolutely fantastic relations with Türkiye, is no longer in need of Iran in a way Armenia needed before. So these are very sound geopolitical reasons, and these reasons are not shared by Azerbaijan, Türkiye, and Armenia, as I understand.
And something else that we've discussed a lot in regards to Armenia over the past year is that movement away from Moscow towards Brussels, towards the EU. 1 year on from this agreement, how do you think the European Union is reacting to this, and what do you think their expectations are of this process as it continues?
I think the European Union is heavily invested in Armenia becoming more independent, more EU inclined. They treat both Turkish-Armenian normalization and Azerbaijan peace as a new reality. Recently, Enlargement Commissioner of EU, Marta Kos, talked about quadrilateral format involving EU, Türkiye, Azerbaijan and Armenia in recognition of this new diplomatic reality. They fully understand that to reduce Armenia's reliance on Russia, they need to incentivize Armenian economy. They actually adopted a set of special measures which they have not adopted in relation to any non-EU country. And they did it for Armenia when, as you remember, there was a visit of Ursula von der Leyen to Azerbaijan, which was followed by her visit to Armenia. EU is doing its level best, but EU is fully conscious of the fact that whatever EU can do for Armenia to ensure Armenia can be more self-reliant will not happen without Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. Therefore, they're supporting both Azerbaijan and Armenia. And from the perspective of EU, as I understand, this region is not viewed as a collection of individual countries, but as a whole. They need access to Central Asia. They know the battle for Central Asia will define the future of the 21st century, and they treat our region, so South Caucasus, as a vital access point. One more point about Russia's leverage. which Armenia needs to not get rid of but reduce. I don't necessarily think Armenian leadership is naive enough to believe that they would be able to get rid of Russian dependency. They want to diversify away from Russia. Diversifying away from Russia doesn't necessarily mean that you're limiting Russia to 0 point. You're actually, what you're doing, you're keeping Russia there, but you're making sure Russia is no longer indispensable. And they want to stay as part of Eurasian Economic Union because it's incredibly beneficial from their perspective. And Russia understands this vulnerability. They know Armenia does not want to leave Eurasian Economic Union. They know that EU aspirations are long term. Armenia is saying that now it's within my best interest to stay within the Eurasian Economic Union. EU is a long-term ambition. Russia is saying you cannot talk like that. You need to make your decision now. So you say, today I'm part of Eurasian Economic Union, but tomorrow I may leave. Russia does not want to give Armenia that leverage of deciding in the fullness of time. Russia wants Armenia to lock Armenia into its orbit, and naturally this is a very understandable process. And allow me to add one more point. In December, Armenia will be under massive pressure from Russia. A couple of things will happen. One of them is that there will be internal discussions within the Eurasian Economic Union to decide whether Armenia could be forced to leave, and Armenia does not want to leave. There will be another issue in November regarding CSTO. Armenia could be deprived of voting rights. And also, Russia is probably planning to increase gas prices in order to put massive pressure on Armenia and to make sure their decision is going to be in favor of Moscow, not Brussels.
All very interesting, isn't it? Thank you very much for wrapping up.
There was a bit of intensity there, I
suppose. A year's gone by very quickly, but a lot has happened. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, pleasure.
Now, after the break, Türkiye, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have signed a new joint defence agreement pledging to treat an armed attack against one member as an attack against all three. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan and Türkiye signed a joint defence pact in Mecca on Friday, bringing together three Sunni Muslim US allies amid growing regional tensions. Under the pact, an armed attack against any one of the three would be considered an attack on all. The statement gave no details on the pact's specific commitments or obligations. The agreement is aimed at strengthening collective security and deterrence as missile attacks and rising tensions involving Israel and Iran raised concerns among Gulf oil exporters about a wider regional conflict. Well, as Türkiye, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are deepening their security ties within this new collective defence agreement, the three countries insist the pact is defensive and not directed against any particular state. Joining us now is Tolga Biline, Director of Galatasaray University's Centre for Strategic Research. Thank you for joining us. Now, how significant is this agreement?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It is, of course, significant. As you mentioned, it is a defense agreement. We are not talking about a military alliance like NATO. It is especially important if you think about the recent history of Saudi Arabia and Turkey relations, because we had many tensions between these two countries recently, but they have healed their relationship. Besides, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have reached an agreement in 2025 about collective defense. So now we are talking about a trilateral defense agreement. There is, of course, one would expect also Egypt to join, because Egypt also was part of quadrilateral negotiations recently, but that remains to be seen. Anyway, today is a turning point in Middle Eastern security architecture.
So you say that Egypt could potentially join, and officials have said the agreement could eventually be opened to other regional countries. But you say this isn't going to become a deeper, broader Middle Eastern security bloc, a bit like NATO.
That's nothing to do with NATO anyway. Around the world, there is no organization comparable to NATO, because when we speak about a military alliance, we also speak about interoperability, we speak about large intelligence sharing, we speak about many other aspects, and even joint command structures. So we are now in the phase of a defense agreement. So the countries have said that if one of us is attacked, the others will help. But even this has to be clarified. What is exactly an attack? As doctors often say about new medicines, the real success is the clinical success. So we have to test this agreement on real time, under real conditions, but still it is an important political signal, and it is about deterrence. So the three countries are now saying to other regional powers, and especially to Iran and to Israel, that when they develop strategies against Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, they have to calculate also the reaction of all three, and we are not alone in the region. So that because it is quite significant.
So you mentioned Israel and Iran there. How should Tel Aviv and Tehran be interpreting this agreement, particularly at a time when the regional balance of power is already under considerable strain?
Of course, the three countries are saying that this is not an alliance to target a specific country, but of course everyone gets the message. Besides, it's a very complementary defense pact in the sense that Turkey is a very old NATO member. Of course, it has important industrial defense industry capacities. It has a very experienced and strong military power. Saudi Arabia has enormous financial capabilities, and Pakistan is the only nuclear Muslim country. So these three countries are very complementary. So all countries in the region, especially Iran and Israel, will interpret that from this lens. Iran, for example, will be can be very concerned because now we are talking about Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey acting together. Israel also have to understand that its expansionist military policies in the region are now being criticized by a large panel of countries. But after all, as you also mentioned, these three countries remain US allies.
And you mentioned Turkey's membership within NATO as well. Could Turkey's participation in this arrangement create any complications for its existing NATO commitments?
Not in principle, because the founding treaty of NATO, the Washington Treaty, allows individual countries to develop bilateral or trilateral defense agreements. Many NATO members have different security arrangements. So in principle, this is not a problem. But as I said earlier, in real time and facing a real crisis, of course, interpretations will be important if Turkey is involved in a crisis, if Pakistan is involved in a crisis, and so on. But of course, for Ankara, the main pillar of national security internationally is to remain a NATO member, as Turkish authorities have emphasized very strongly during the Ankara summit a couple of weeks ago.
And you mentioned the different military capabilities of each country and the strategic relationships here. What's in it for each of these countries to join an agreement like this?
This is also, we also have to look at the bigger picture, which means that we are living in a turbulent period, and the international system is taking a new shape. We are in a multi-polar area. And all these countries, which are United States allies, have now a confidence problem with the US. Even in Western European countries have difficult time to trust now 100% the United States protection. So in fact, the real meaning of this agreement is that regional powers are now providing security for each other, and they are not only consumers of security provided by the United States. And they are also diversifying their partnerships, and they are also diversifying their options. So everybody is getting ready to the new international system.
All very interesting, isn't it? Thank you very much for joining us on the programme and for sharing all of those insights.
You're welcome.
After the break, we'll check in with our correspondents from around the globe, so do stay with us. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. The European Union's Commissioner for Internal Affairs and Migration says the EU should use its leverage to strengthen its partnership with Morocco. The comments came as the European Parliament held an emergency meeting to discuss developments in Ceuta after more than 75,000 people crossed into the Spanish territory in North Africa. William Denslow reports from Brussels.
In this extraordinary meeting at the European Parliament, we heard from the leader of the exclave of Ceuta, who said that up to 5,000 people were still residing in this Spanish territory that had crossed over from Morocco a few days ago. He said that while it is a huge alleviation and ease on burden resources after more than 70,000 people had returned back across the border, he says that it's still far from a return to normal. Now, at this meeting of the European Parliament, we also heard from Magnus Brunner giving the European Commission's perspective on what transpired and what to do to prevent such a crisis, as many in Europe have described this, from transpiring in the future. He said the fact that no people had transferred from Ceuta to the larger mainland Europe and into the Schengen zone that so many European member states had been concerned about. He said that that was a sign that the stress test, if you want to put it in those terms, had been a success. But he said there was certainly still room for improvement as far as the European Union is concerned. Now, what Brunner is suggesting, what the European Commission is suggesting, is a series of steps going forward. This includes bolstering early warning systems to potential flash points in the future along its external borders, to see better cooperation with non-EU members, to see a better targeting of smuggling networks, something that the EU has blamed this crisis very much on mafia-style gangs of human traffickers, as well as reinforcing the policy of returns. Now, Brunner added a little bit more detail in this meeting to lawmakers. He said that the European Union is ready to do more when it comes to assisting Spain, especially when it comes to EU agents to bolster its borders, but says it's still waiting for permission from Madrid to provide that. He also said on that issue of closer cooperation with third-party nations, including, and in particular in this instance with Morocco, he said that the EU should use all of its leverage at its proposal to deepen partnerships. This includes leverage when it comes to visas, when it comes to trade, developmental cooperation. So certainly the EU looks to be targeting these areas to prevent an episode like this from transpiring in the future. And certainly the message from local officials in Ceuta is that more needs to be done to give them more confidence that indeed its borders are secure. William Denslow, Frey News, Brussels.
Now, as talks over the Strait of Hormuz are advancing, its closure continues to affect global industries, including agriculture. The UN warns that soaring fertiliser prices could threaten Afghanistan's wheat harvest next year, despite forecasts of a strong harvest. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis reports.
The UN Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, says Afghanistan is on track for an excellent wheat season this year, thanks to above-average rainfall across much of the country. However, the agency warns that high fertilizer prices are putting those gains at risk. According to the FAO, many farmers may not be able to afford enough fertilizer for their wheat crops. This could result in lower yields and could potentially affect food security in the 2027 harvest season. To address the challenges, the FAO is appealing for $38.3 million to provide certified wheat seeds and fertilizer to 600,000 farmers across Afghanistan. The FAO says the spike in fertilizer prices is linked to disruptions in the global supply chain caused by tensions in the Middle East. The organization has previously warned that instability in the region had disrupted fertilizer exports and increased costs worldwide, threatening agricultural production in vulnerable countries. Millions of Afghans are already facing food insecurity. The FAO says that helping farmers is essential for protecting next year's harvest and strengthening the country's food supply. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Azerbaijan has filed a formal complaint with Georgia after truck drivers said they were held for days at the border with no explanation. Tbilisi says it's investigating the incident. Our correspondent Nini Nikolaishvili has the story.
Azerbaijan's embassy in Tbilisi filed a diplomatic note on the 5th of August. It follows reports that a group of Azerbaijani drivers carrying transit cargo were held at checkpoints, including Sarpi and Red Bridge, as well as Tbilisi's customs clearance center. Drivers said their documents were confiscated without an official reason given. Georgia's foreign minister confirmed the report, saying the note was passed to relevant state agencies, saying it is taking measures according to Georgian law. Georgia's revenue service has said that cargo movement through checkpoints has been running smoothly and that the case is under investigation. This is not the first time a situation like this has happened. In November, trucks carrying tobacco from Azerbaijan to Europe via Georgia were stopped at Batumi and Tbilisi customs for roughly 20 days without explanation. Complaints about the treatment of Azerbaijan drivers first surfaced in September 2025. Georgia's prime minister has said he found no evidence of a systemic problem. Georgia has positioned itself as a regional connectivity hub linking South Caucasus, Europe, Turkey, and Central Asia. However, these kinds of reported delays affecting Azerbaijan, one of its closest partners, is a test of these relationships. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Russia's fuel supply problems are beginning to affect countries beyond its borders. Tajikistan has nearly tripled fuel imports from neighbouring Central Asian states after deliveries from Russia sharply dropped. The government is now looking for alternative suppliers. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina has the details.
Tajikistan has nearly tripled its fuel imports from neighboring Central Asian countries as supplies from Russia continue to decline. In July, the country imported 34,000 tons of fuel from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. The increase comes as Russia faces a fuel crisis following Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries. Just a month earlier, Russia had been Tajikistan's main fuel supplier, but in July, gasoline exports were cut in half to 14,000 tons. Diesel shipments fell slightly, while no jet fuel was delivered at all. At the same time, Tajikistan sharply increased purchases from neighboring countries, with jet fuel imports rising almost eightfold. The government has since confirmed it's seeking alternative suppliers, with Kazakhstan seen as the leading partner. Negotiations are also underway with China, Turkmenistan, Iran and Belarus. Meanwhile, Tajikistan's Ministry of Transport has attributed the supply disruptions to military operations in the Middle East. Consumers are already feeling the impact. Since early June, the price of EI92 gasoline has climbed from around $1.20 to approximately $1.35 per liter. Diesel prices have also risen as fuel shortages continue to affect the domestic market. Tajikistan is not the only country facing supply problems. Kyrgyzstan has asked Uzbekistan to provide an additional 20,000 tons of fuel a month, while also holding talks with Belarus, China, Azerbaijan and Turkey. In Mongolia, which relies on Russia for 95% of its fuel imports, authorities have already introduced limits on gasoline sales to motorists. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
After the break, we'll take a look at the other top stories making the headlines today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. President Trump says the war with Iran could end soon as negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz continue. His comments come as Iran and Oman move closer to a new shipping arrangement for the strait, although commercial traffic is still heavily restricted.
US President Donald Trump says he believes the conflict with Iran could end soon, as negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz are showing signs of progress. Speaking at the White House, Trump did not confirm that a deal had been reached, but said talks were moving in a positive direction.
But I think we're doing very well. I'm involved in the negotiation. I think we're doing fine. It could be soon, yeah.
Despite diplomatic efforts, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remains heavily restricted. Only a limited number of commercial vessels are crossing the waterway each day. Iranian state media reports that Tehran and Oman are close to agreeing on a new framework to manage maritime traffic through the strait. Under the proposed arrangement, vessels entering the Gulf would pass through Iranian waters, while ships leaving would use routes that are closer to Oman. Iran describes the plan as a new regional security model rather than a full return to previous navigation arrangements. The agreement still requires approval from Iran's Supreme National Security Council before it can be formally announced. The Strait of Hormuz normally handles about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas supplies, making any deal to restore commercial shipping closely watched by international markets.
US-mediated negotiations between Lebanon and Israel have wrapped up in Rome with some progress, but no agreement on the main territorial dispute. The latest round has also laid the groundwork for further talks next month.
3 days of negotiations between Israel and Lebanon produced agreements on prisoner procedures and future security arrangements, but failed to break the deadlock over disputed border areas. The latest round of talks covered military, political, legal and border issues, along with the question of prisoners. Negotiators were unable to agree on expanding the proposed areas for a phased Israeli withdrawal along the border. Lebanon wants an additional area included, while Israel said verification measures in the first 2 areas should be completed before any expansion. Despite the impasse, the sides exchanged preliminary lists of detained and missing people. Lebanon submitted a list of its citizens who are detained or unaccounted for, saying the release of civilian detainees should come first. Israel provided a list of Lebanese Jews who are missing or believed to have been killed in Lebanon. Sources said the parties also agreed on potential future monitoring arrangements and to pursue a new UN Security Council resolution that would provide the international framework for security arrangements following the mandate of the UN interim force in Lebanon. US officials have reportedly committed to continuing engagement with both sides on detainees and border demarcation ahead of the next round of negotiations. For now, they are tentatively scheduled for September 1st. Meanwhile, the United Nations said it recorded the sharpest escalation in Israeli military activity since late June, with 120 projectiles fired by Israel by late afternoon on Thursday. UN peacekeepers also reported airstrikes and dozens of Israeli airspace violations, saying they were using liaison channels with both militaries to help ease tensions and support the existing ceasefire.
Ukraine says it has intensified its long-range attacks on Russian military and energy infrastructure. President Zelensky is also pushing to fast-track the development of Ukraine's own advanced missile defense capabilities. Here's the latest.
Ukraine says it has carried out long-range strikes on 2 Russian oil refineries, as well as targeting patrol boats and other vessels in the Black Sea. In a post on Telegram, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukrainian forces struck the Bashneft Novoil refinery in Bashkortostan. He says they also struck the Slavneft Yanos refinery in Russia's Yaroslavl region. The regional governor said emergency crews extinguished a major fire at the refinery following what he described as the largest Ukrainian drone attack on the region. He said Russian air defenses shot down 93 drones. He also said 4 people suffered shrapnel injuries, but there were no fatalities. The Yaroslavl refinery, which has been targeted before, processes around 15 million tons of oil a year. The latest exchanges have also drawn international concern. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the recent wave of large-scale missile and drone attacks by both Russia and Ukraine, according to a UN spokesperson.
The Secretary-General is deeply concerned by the continued escalation of the conflict, including onto the territory of the Russian Federation. In this regard, he also condemns the recent Ukrainian drone attacks on several regions of the Russian Federation, which reportedly resulted in civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure.
Meanwhile, President Zelensky says Ukraine is stepping up efforts to develop its own advanced missile defense capabilities. He says he has met senior officials to speed up weapons development, with the aim of delivering tangible results by the end of the year. He also says Ukraine wants to accelerate work on both an anti-ballistic missile defense system and domestically produced ballistic missiles.
Only a tiny minority of countries worldwide have developed an anti-ballistic project of this kind for themselves. Ukraine must join this group of nations. We are creating all the necessary conditions to make that happen. Others spent decades developing their systems. Ukraine must do this as quickly as possible, with concrete results already in place by the turn of 2026 to 2027. Ukraine is also working to develop ballistic missiles of its own. The tests have shown strong potential. We need to turn this into a real weapon.
Zelensky also referred to Ukraine's participation in the Freya program, a joint European project to develop an anti-ballistic missile defense system as an alternative to the Patriot system used by the United States.
As governments around the world move to strengthen protections for children online, a landmark court ruling in the US is the latest in a global effort to hold technology firms accountable.
A court in the U.S. state of New Mexico has ordered Meta to pay $567 million in a ruling that holds the company responsible for what it said was harm to children's mental health. The presiding judge said Meta created a public nuisance among youth in the state with a design that encourages addictive use among children. She also said the company failed to adequately protect minors from sexual exploitation. Under a 5-year court order, Meta must introduce a broad range of youth safety measures for users in New Mexico. That includes monthly limits on teenagers' use of Facebook and Instagram, restrictions on notifications designed to drive engagement, and tighter controls on contact between adults and minors. It also includes additional safeguards for AI-powered chatbots and enhanced review procedures for reports involving child sexual abuse. Meta has said it will appeal the ruling, arguing it has invested heavily in protecting teenagers online and removing harmful content. Many countries have instituted or proposed social media restrictions for children under 16. They have raised concerns over mental health, online safety, cyberbullying, addictive platform design, and exposure to harmful content. Policies from countries in the European Union, Australia, and Azerbaijan reflect a broader global push to hold technology companies more accountable for protecting young users online.
President Trump's Board of Peace has issued its first construction contract for Gaza, according to reports. It's a project to build a small military outpost for Moroccan troops. The planned facility would house around 150 personnel as part of an international stabilization force. The contract has not yet been finalized and is expected to be one of several projects linked to Trump's Gaza reconstruction plans. The move comes as much of Gaza remains heavily damaged following the war, with millions of residents facing severe humanitarian challenges. And finally this evening, Ukraine's long-range drone campaign is increasingly affecting daily life inside Russia. The country's leading online retailer is now at the centre of growing disruption, with businesses across the country feeling the consequences.
Ukraine's drone strikes have knocked out more than a fifth of Wildberries' warehouse capacity, disrupting deliveries across Russia and hitting thousands of businesses that rely on the country's leading e-commerce retailer. Since the 18th of July, around 20 Wildberries warehouse sites have been targeted, sparking major fires and disrupting the company's logistics network. A Reuters review of satellite imagery found that at least 1.18 million square meters of storage space has been damaged or destroyed. The disruption is being felt by franchise operators and online sellers who depend on Wildberries to reach customers. According to Wildberries, 95% of customer orders are collected from pickup points. More than 3,100 franchise pickup points have now been put up for sale across Russia.
Sales have dropped by about 50% over the past month, and that is because there are almost no deliveries. There is still some inventory being cleared from warehouses, but every month the volume keeps declining.
Ukraine has accused Wildberries of supporting Russia's war effort and says its strikes are intended to making it more expensive for Moscow to keep going. The company and the Kremlin have denied allegations that Wildberries is supplying the military. The company has introduced discounts, payment deferrals, and voluntary compensation for sellers who've been affected by drone attacks. The fashion brand Fin Flair, which lost more than $1 million worth of stock, is one of them.
We plan to negotiate with Wildberries. They are one of our key partners. It has been and remains our key partner. At the moment, we have information that Wildberries will be making compensation payments. They plan to start with smaller sellers because they were affected the most.
But for many businesses, the disruption is ongoing. With deliveries still constrained and thousands of sellers affected, uncertainty remains over how quickly Wildberries can restore its logistics network and how long businesses can withstand the disruption.
That's all we've got time for tonight on Prime Time. From all of us here in the studio, thank you very much for watching and have a safe and restful weekend. Good night.